The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood at her bedroom window. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official letter that had arrived just hours before. The words seemed to blur together, but their meaning was crystal clear. William would be departing for a dangerous military mission that could keep them apart for months, possibly longer. She had known this day might come. When she married into the royal family, she understood that duty would often separate them. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two entirely different experiences. The weight of the news settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. William found her there 20 minutes later, still in her nightgown, still staring out at the peaceful gardens that would soon feel so empty. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into his familiar warmth. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. They had learned over the years that sometimes silence communicated more than words ever could. The children were still sleeping down the hall. George, Charlotte, and Louis had no idea that their father would be leaving them soon. The thought of explaining this to them made Catherine's heart ache even more. How do you tell a child that Daddy has to go away to serve his country, not knowing when he'll return? William's reflection appeared beside hers in the window glass. His jaw was set in that determined way she knew so well, but she could see the pain in his eyes. He was torn between his love for his family and his sense of duty to the crown and country. This internal struggle had been eating at him for weeks, ever since he first learned about the mission. The royal household was already beginning to stir. Catherine could hear the soft footsteps of staff members beginning their daily routines. Soon their private moment would be interrupted by the demands of royal life. There would be meetings to attend, public appearances to maintain, and the careful management of information that came with their positions. Catherine turned in William's arms to face him directly. His blue eyes, usually so bright and confident, held shadows she hadn't seen since the early days of their relationship, when the pressure of public scrutiny nearly drove them apart. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines she had memorized over their years together. The mission details were classified, but Catherine knew enough to understand the risks involved. William would be serving alongside other military personnel in a region where tensions had been escalating for months. The royal family's military traditions ran deep, and William felt the pull of that heritage strongly. His father had served, his grandfather had served, and now it was his turn to answer the call. Their love story had begun at university, far from the glare of cameras and the weight of royal expectations. They had been just William and Kate then, two young people navigating their studies and falling in love. Those simple days seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the connection they had forged then remained the foundation of everything they had built together. As the morning light grew stronger, Catherine made a silent promise to herself. She would be strong for William, for their children, and for the millions of people who looked to the royal family for stability and hope. But first, she needed to memorize this moment, this feeling of being complete and together, before duty called them apart once again. 3 days had passed since the letter arrived, and the royal household buzzed with quiet preparation. Catherine watched as William's personal aide carefully packed his military gear, each item folded with precision and care. The sight of his uniform hanging in their closet had been a stark reminder of the reality they were about to face. The children sensed something was different. George, being the eldest, asked pointed questions that William answered with gentle honesty. Charlotte clung more tightly to her father during their bedtime stories, as if she could sense the approaching separation. Little Louis continued his cheerful chatter, blissfully unaware that their family dynamic was about to change dramatically. Catherine threw herself into planning. She organized schedules, coordinated with the children's schools, and made arrangements for the increased security that would be necessary during William's absence. Staying busy helped keep her emotions in check, but quiet moments still caught her off guard. She would find herself staring at William's coffee cup in the morning, or his reading glasses left on the nightstand, wondering how long it would be before she saw these small, everyday reminders of his presence again. The palace staff treated the situation with the professional discretion that came with years of serving the royal family. They had witnessed many farewells over the decades, understanding that duty and personal sacrifice were woven into the very fabric of royal life. Yet even the most experienced among them could see the strain this particular separation was placing on the young family. William spent extra time with each child individually. He read George additional chapters of their current book, teaching him about courage and responsibility. With Charlotte, he had tea parties and promised to write her letters describing the different places he would visit. Louis received extra piggyback rides and tickle fights, creating joyful memories that would have to sustain them both. The international media had begun to pick up whispers of William's deployment. Catherine knew it was only a matter of time before the story broke publicly, adding another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. The Royal Communications team worked tirelessly to manage the information flow, balancing security concerns with the public's interest in the royal family. On the fourth evening, Catherine and William took a long walk through the private gardens of their residence. The autumn air was crisp and leaves crunched beneath their feet as they followed familiar paths they had walked countless times before. They talked about practical matters first: how to maintain communication, what to tell the children about security protocols, and how Catherine would handle upcoming royal engagements alone. But as they walked deeper into the gardens, away from any possibility of being overheard, their conversation turned more personal. William spoke about his fears, not of the mission itself, but of missing precious time with his family. Catherine shared her own concerns about managing everything alone while maintaining the strong public face expected of her. They found themselves at the small gazebo where William had proposed years earlier. Sitting on the same bench where they had planned their future together, they now faced the reality of being apart for an unknown period. William pulled out a small wrapped package, a locket containing photos of the children. Catherine had prepared her own gift, a leather journal where she promised to write him letters describing every day they were apart. The evening grew darker around them, but neither wanted to break the spell of this quiet intimacy. They knew that tomorrow would bring final preparations, official briefings, and the beginning of their temporary goodbye. Tonight was still theirs, still normal, still complete. The final morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, as if nature itself was trying to provide comfort during this difficult day. Catherine woke before dawn, finding William already awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. They had both slept fitfully, stealing glances at each other throughout the night, trying to memorize the simple comfort of being together. The children's breakfast was unusually quiet. George pushed his cereal around his bowl while asking serious questions about when Daddy would return. Charlotte sat closer to William than usual, occasionally reaching out to touch his hand as if making sure he was still really there. Louis, sensing the subdued mood, was less talkative than usual but kept offering William bites of his toast with jam. Catherine had planned every detail of this morning to create lasting positive memories. She prepared William's favorite breakfast, arranged for the children to give him special handmade gifts, and ensured that their final family moments would be filled with love rather than sadness. Her own emotions threatened to overwhelm her, but she channeled them into caring for everyone else. The security briefing took place in William's study while Catherine helped the children get ready for school. The normalcy of this routine felt both comforting and heartbreaking. Soon there would be no reason to pack George's football kit or remind Charlotte about her piano lesson. The rhythms of their family life would continue, but with a crucial element missing. William's military colleagues arrived at mid-morning, their professional demeanor a stark contrast to the intimate family atmosphere. Catherine greeted them graciously, offering tea and inquiring about their families. She had learned over the years that treating everyone with genuine warmth often made difficult situations more bearable for everyone involved. The children said their goodbyes before leaving for school. George stood tall and shook his father's hand like a proper gentleman, though his eyes remained bright with unshed tears. Charlotte hugged William tightly and made him promise to look at the stars every night, because she would be looking at them too. Louis simply climbed into his father's arms and stayed there until Catherine gently reminded him about the school schedule. As the cars carrying the children disappeared down the drive, the residence suddenly felt too large and too quiet. Catherine and William found themselves alone with just a few more hours before his departure. They walked through their home together, stopping in doorways of rooms that held special memories. The nursery where they had rocked all 3 babies, the kitchen where they cooked together on quiet Sunday mornings, the library where they had spent countless evenings reading beside each other. In their bedroom, William's packed bags waited by the door like silent sentinels. Catherine helped him with final adjustments to his uniform, her fingers working automatically on buttons and insignia, while her mind tried to capture every detail of this moment. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the familiar scent of his aftershave, the gentle pressure of his hands on her shoulders. They sat together on their bed, holding hands and talking softly about everything and nothing. William promised to write as often as possible and to call whenever communication was permitted. Catherine assured him that she would keep him informed of every detail of the children's lives, from lost teeth to school achievements. They made plans for how they would celebrate when he returned, already anticipating the joy of being reunited. The final hour approached with relentless precision. Catherine could hear vehicles arriving outside, the quiet efficiency of people preparing for departure. Soon William would walk out their front door and she would watch him leave, not knowing when she would see him again. The weight of that reality pressed down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe normally. The time had come. Catherine stood in the grand entrance hall, watching as William's team conducted final equipment checks. The marble floors that had witnessed centuries of royal farewells now prepared to witness another. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, a gesture that helped her maintain composure while her heart felt like it might shatter. William moved with the controlled efficiency of someone fulfilling a duty while fighting against personal emotion. He double-checked documents, confirmed communication protocols, and spoke quietly with his commanding officer. Yet Catherine could see the way his eyes kept finding her across the room, as if drawing strength from her presence. The palace photographer had been granted permission to document this historic moment, though Catherine had requested that the images remain private until after William's safe return. She understood the historical significance of a future king leaving for military service, but today she was simply a wife watching her husband depart for danger. As the final minutes approached, the staff began to withdraw, granting the couple their privacy for goodbye. The entrance hall, usually filled with the sounds of official business, became almost cathedral quiet. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat, the soft tick of the ancient grandfather clock, and the distant sound of London traffic beyond the palace walls. William approached her slowly, as if he too wanted to stretch these final moments into eternity. When he reached her, he took both her hands in his thumbs gently stroking her knuckles. They had said so much over the past few days. Yet now, facing the actual moment of separation, words seemed inadequate. They stood facing each other in the center of the hall, surrounded by portraits of William's ancestors, many of whom had faced similar moments of duty-bound separation. The weight of history and tradition pressed around them, but in that moment, they were simply two people in love who had to say goodbye. Catherine reached up to straighten William's uniform one final time, her fingers lingering on the insignia that marked his rank and service. He caught her hands and brought them to his lips, pressing gentle kisses to her palms. The gesture was so tender, so personal amid all the official protocols, that Catherine felt tears threaten for the first time that morning. The sound of engines starting outside served as a stark reminder that time was running out. William pulled Catherine closer, wrapping her in his arms with a desperation that he had kept carefully controlled until now. She could feel his heart racing against her chest. Matching the rhythm of her own, he whispered words meant only for her, promises to stay safe, expressions of love that would have to sustain them both, and quiet reassurances that this separation was temporary. Catherine whispered back her own promises, to take care of their children, to be strong, and to count every day until his return. The embrace lasted several minutes, neither willing to be the first to step back. Palace staff waited respectfully at a distance, understanding that this moment belonged entirely to the couple. Even the most protocol-conscious among them recognized that some things transcended royal procedure. When they finally began to separate, it was with the slow reluctance of two people fighting against an invisible force, pulling them apart. Their hands remained connected until the very last possible second, fingers intertwining and then slowly releasing as duty called William away from love. William picked up his bag with one hand while keeping the other extended toward Catherine until distance made contact impossible. His eyes never left her face, memorizing every feature as he backed toward the door. Catherine stood perfectly still, her chin raised with the dignity expected of her position, but her eyes speaking volumes about the cost of royal service. The great doors of the palace opened, revealing the waiting vehicles and the team of people who would accompany William on his journey. The transition from private husband to public servant was almost visible as William's military bearing reasserted itself. Yet even as he walked through those doors, he turned back one final time, finding Catherine's eyes across the distance. Catherine moved to the window as the motorcade prepared to depart, her composure wavering for the first time since dawn. Through the glass, she could see William settling into the back seat of the lead vehicle, his profile visible as he spoke with his aide. Even from this distance, she could read the tension in his shoulders, the weight of leaving everything he loved behind. The palace photographer captured the scene discreetly. Catherine silhouetted against the window, her hand pressed to the glass, watching the man she loved prepare to drive out of her life for an unknown period. The image would later become one of the most poignant royal photographs ever taken, though at that moment, Catherine was unconscious of anything except the growing ache in her chest. As the vehicles began to move, time seemed to slow down. Catherine watched each second of William's departure with painful clarity. The crunch of gravel under the wheels, the way the morning sunlight reflected off the car windows, the gradual increase in speed as the motorcade headed toward the palace gates. Every detail burned itself into her memory. William's car passed directly beneath her window, and for one heart-stopping moment she saw him look up. Their eyes met through the glass and distance, and Catherine saw her own pain reflected in his face. He raised his hand slightly in a gesture that was part wave, part blessing, part desperate attempt to maintain connection across the growing space between them. Catherine raised her own hand to match his, pressing her palm flat against the window. They stayed connected like this for the few seconds it took for the car to pass beneath her vantage point. Then he was gone, visible only as part of a convoy moving steadily away from everything that meant home to him. The sound of the vehicles faded gradually, replaced by the normal sounds of London awakening to a new day. Birds sang in the palace gardens. Traffic hummed in the distance, and somewhere in the building a telephone rang with the everyday business of royal life. The world continued its normal rhythm, indifferent to the personal drama that had just unfolded. Catherine remained at the window long after the motorcade disappeared from view. Staff members moved quietly around her, understanding that she needed these moments to process what had just happened. The woman who would soon need to face the public with strength and grace was allowed these precious minutes to simply be a wife missing her husband. When she finally turned away from the window, Catherine caught her reflection in a mirror across the hall. She looked surprisingly composed, her hair still perfectly styled, her dress unwrinkled despite the emotional intensity of the morning. Only her eyes betrayed what she had just experienced, a depth of sadness that makeup couldn't hide and royal training couldn't completely mask. Her private secretary approached cautiously, carrying the day's schedule and wearing the careful expression of someone who understood they were interrupting a moment of grief. Catherine nodded to signal her readiness to resume her duties, though her heart remained focused on a convoy now miles away, carrying the most important person in her world toward uncertainty. The first official engagement was a visit to a children's hospital, carefully chosen to provide Catherine with the comfort that came from focusing on others. She would spend the afternoon bringing joy to young patients, their innocent smiles and grateful families providing a welcome distraction from her own concerns. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave for the hospital, Catherine made a silent promise to herself and to William. She would honor their love by living fully during their separation, by caring for their children with the strength of two parents, and by serving their people with the same dedication that now called William away from them. The palace staff watched with professional admiration as Catherine transformed before their eyes from grieving wife to composed princess. It was a masterclass in royal duty, the kind of grace under pressure that had defined the monarchy for generations. Yet those who knew her best could see the cost of this transformation in the careful way she held herself, as if one wrong movement might cause her carefully maintained composure to crumble. Hours later, as Catherine visited the children's hospital, images from the morning's farewell began circulating on social media. A palace staff member had shared a photo of the final embrace, and within minutes, it had spread across the internet like wildfire. The image showed Catherine and William holding each other in the palace entrance hall, their body language speaking volumes about love, duty, and sacrifice. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from around the world as people recognized the profound humanity in that captured moment. The photograph transcended royal protocol and political boundaries, speaking to anyone who had ever faced separation from someone they loved. Social media platforms filled with comments from military families, diplomatic spouses, and ordinary people who saw their own experiences reflected in the royal couple's goodbye. News outlets picked up the story, but for once the coverage focused on the emotional reality rather than speculation or criticism. Commentators spoke about the weight of royal duty, the sacrifices made by those who serve, and the strength required to maintain public composure while facing private heartbreak. The image became a symbol of grace under pressure, of love persisting despite circumstances. Catherine learned about the photo's impact during her hospital visit, when a young patient's mother mentioned seeing it online and being moved to tears. The woman spoke about her own husband's deployment overseas and how the royal couple's goodbye had helped her feel less alone in her experience. In that moment, Catherine understood that their private pain had somehow become a source of comfort for others facing similar challenges. As evening approached, Catherine returned to a palace that felt impossibly empty. The children's voices echoed differently in spaces that had been shaped by William's presence. Dinner was quieter, bedtime stories felt incomplete, and the simple routines of family life required conscious effort to maintain their warmth and normalcy. But throughout that first long day of separation, Catherine was sustained by an unexpected source of strength, the knowledge that their love story had touched millions of people around the world. The spontaneous sharing of their farewell moment had created a global community of support that she hadn't anticipated. Messages continued to arrive from people offering prayers, sharing their own stories of separation, and expressing admiration for the couple's demonstration of love and duty. That night, as Catherine prepared for bed alone for the first time in years, she found herself thinking about the photograph that had captured their goodbye. She hadn't seen it yet herself, but the descriptions from others painted a picture of two people saying farewell with dignity, love, and hope. The image had apparently caught something essential about their relationship, the way they supported each other through difficult times, the depth of their connection, and their commitment to serving others even at personal cost. Her phone buzzed with a message from William, sent from his first stop during the deployment journey. The text was brief, limited by security protocols but filled with love. He had learned about the photograph's impact and wanted her to know how proud he was of her strength throughout the day. His words reminded her that even separated by distance and duty, they remained connected by something deeper than circumstances could touch. Catherine looked out her bedroom window at the same view she had watched William leave from that morning. The gardens were peaceful in the moonlight, the same yet different now that she was viewing them alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, and small steps toward the day when William would return. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of missing him while also feeling grateful for a love that had inspired millions of people around the world. The photograph that had captured their last embrace would be remembered as one of the most moving royal images ever taken, but for Catherine it was simply a moment frozen in time, preserving the love that would sustain them both through the long days of separation ahead. In that image, she saw not just goodbye, but the promise of reunion, not just duty, but the love that made such sacrifice meaningful.